In 2010, scientists uncovered an entirely lost branch of humanity by decoding DNA pulled from a child's tiny finger bone found deep inside a Siberian cave. That species came to be known as the Denisovans, and for almost 15 years, they existed only as genetic code, completely invisible in physical form. Billions of people alive today carry Denisovan genes running through their bodies, yet nobody actually knew what these ancient relatives looked like. Then, in 2018, an anonymous skull that had spent generations hidden inside a Chinese well finally resurfaced, and it ended up challenging almost everything scientists assumed about these mysterious humans. Tonight, we're going to walk through how a few milligrams of fossilized tooth plaque managed to solve one of the greatest mysteries in the entire story of human evolution, and why the consequences reach far beyond a single strand of DNA. What did the Denisovans actually look like? And what does their long overdue reappearance really mean for the rest of our own story? A finger bone that rewrote the family tree. In 2008, deep inside Denisova Cave, tucked into the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia, Russian archaeologists uncovered a small fragment of a child's pinky finger. The bone itself was tiny and, at first glance, completely unremarkable. But it held a secret that would eventually turn the entire study of human origins upside down. When geneticists Svante Pääbo and Johannes Krause, working at the Max Planck Institute, sequenced its mitochondrial DNA, the results genuinely stunned the scientific world. Instead, it belonged to a completely unknown, previously unidentified branch of the human family tree. This marked the very first time in history that an entirely new human species had been identified purely through DNA, without a single recognizable bone to compare it against. Scientists suddenly possessed the complete genetic blueprint of an entire vanished branch of humanity, but almost nothing describing their actual physical appearance. The only confirmed Denisovan remains at the time were that single tiny finger bone, a handful of unusually massive teeth, each one nearly twice the size of a modern human molar, and one small fragment of skull. No full skeleton, no recognizable face. For years afterward, Denisovans existed essentially as a ghost species, visible only through subtle patterns hidden inside their DNA. Researchers tried creative ways to bridge that gap. Pääbo's team pioneered a technique called DNA methylation mapping, which reads chemical markers preserved on ancient DNA to make educated inferences about how certain genes might have shaped the body. Their predictions sketched out a rough outline. Denisovans likely had a wide pelvis, an elongated face, a broad rib cage, and unusually large joints. But these remained careful, educated guesses, rather than direct physical observations. Without real fossils available to actually test these predictions against, the true appearance of the Denisovans stayed an unsolved puzzle for years. The mystery only deepened further as more scattered clues slowly surfaced. A partial jawbone recovered from the Tibetan plateau hinted that Denisovans had once ranged far beyond Siberia. But even that connection relied entirely on protein analysis, rather than actual DNA evidence. Those unusually large teeth, so oversized that Pääbo once joked they must have belonged to giants, suggested powerful jaws and unusually large mouths, but left everything else entirely up to imagination. For 15 straight years, the Denisovans remained evolution's greatest unsolved enigma. An entire people defined purely by genetic code, never by an actual face or physical form. The search for their true identity became one of the most persistent, stubborn quests in all of modern science. A skull hidden in a well for 85 years. In 1933, along the muddy banks of the Songhua River in northeastern China, a laborer digging for gravel uncovered something genuinely extraordinary. It wasn't gold and it wasn't jade. It was a skull. Massive, heavy, and completely unlike anything he had ever laid eyes on before. At the time, the region sat under Japanese occupation, and rumors swirled constantly about ancient artifacts and bones quietly vanishing into foreign hands. Fearing that his remarkable find would simply be seized and taken away, the man carefully wrapped the skull and lowered it deep into an abandoned well, trusting the darkness below to keep it safely hidden. The skull quietly survived war, revolution, and the constant chaos of a country going through massive upheaval, its secret kept safe by a single man's silence. 85 years later, that secret finally came to light. Nearing the end of his own life, the elderly laborer finally shared the full story with his grandson. Acting on his grandfather's careful instructions, the young man retrieved the skull from deep inside the well, and remarkably, it was still fully intact after all those decades underground. In 2018, the family finally brought the fossil to Hebei GEO University, where scientists immediately recognized its enormous importance. The skull measured more than 9 inches in length and roughly 6 inches wide, making it the largest human skull ever discovered anywhere in the world. One single tooth remained rooted in the jaw, its enamel visibly worn but never broken. The face itself was broad, the brow ridges notably thick, and the eye sockets appeared almost perfectly square. Paleoanthropologist Chang Ji led the initial scientific analysis. The skull's unusual mixture of both ancient and surprisingly modern traits genuinely puzzled the research team. Its brain case was long and low rather than rounded like our own. The cheekbones were flat and remarkably delicate, and yet the overall features somehow still projected raw physical strength. And yet, serious questions still remained unanswered. Who exactly was Dragon Man? Was this finally the long-hidden face of the elusive Denisovans, or did it represent an entirely separate, previously unknown branch of humanity altogether? The answers would ultimately depend on the meticulous work of scientists like Qiaomei Fu, whose deep expertise in ancient DNA would soon put the Harbin skull through the ultimate scientific test. 6 failed attempts, and then a breakthrough. Qiaomei Fu faced a genuine dilemma, the kind that would have sent most researchers straight back to the drawing board. Her team made 6 separate attempts to extract usable DNA from the Harbin skull, targeting both the massive remaining tooth and the dense petrous bone located near the ear. Every single attempt came back completely empty. After roughly 146,000 years buried in the shifting riverbank mud of northeastern China, not a single usable strand of ancient DNA remained anywhere in the places scientists would normally expect to find it. The Harbin specimen, so tantalizingly complete in every other respect, seemed genuinely destined to remain permanently silent about its true identity. But Fu noticed something that most researchers would likely have overlooked entirely: a thin, mineralized crust still clinging to the root of the skull's one remaining tooth. This was dental calculus, the fossilized version of ordinary plaque that gradually forms when bacteria and trapped food particles harden together over the course of an entire lifetime. While bone and tooth enamel often surrender absolutely nothing useful after tens of thousands of years, dental calculus can sometimes function as a genuine biological time capsule, trapping microscopic fragments of DNA safely within its own crystalline layers. Somehow, this overlooked plaque had quietly kept a secret hidden inside it. With extremely steady hands, Fu's team carefully scraped away just 0.3 of a milligram of material, barely enough to cover the very tip of a needle. This minuscule sample carried enormous risk attached to it. Ancient dental calculus is notoriously prone to soaking up modern DNA from absolutely everyone who has ever handled it. When the first round of results came back, nearly 80% of all the genetic material recovered turned out to be contamination, stray traces left behind by scientists, museum curators, and essentially anyone who had ever touched the skull over the decades. Contamination alone threatened to bury this entire discovery before it could even properly begin. To carefully separate genuine signal from all that background noise, the team relied on advanced filtering protocols specifically developed for exactly this kind of challenging scenario. They hunted for genetic patterns that would be essentially impossible to fake, specifically searching for mitochondrial DNA fragments that matched neither any living human population nor any known Neanderthal sample. The real breakthrough finally came with the identification of 27 distinct gene variants. Every single one of them had previously been found only in confirmed Denisovan remains recovered from deep inside Siberia. Not a single one of these variants could be traced back to modern contamination. That overlooked crust of dental calculus, ignored by generations of earlier scientists, had quietly preserved the unmistakable genetic fingerprint of a genuine Denisovan. Fu, who had actually helped discover the Denisovans as a species roughly 15 years earlier, now found herself standing right at the center of finally unmasking their true face. She told reporters afterward, "After 15 years, we give the Denisovan a face. It is really a special feeling. I feel really happy." For the very first time, solid molecular evidence directly tied a nearly complete skull to the confirmed Denisovan lineage. This ghost species, known for so long purely through scattered fragments of genetic code, finally had a real face, one drawn from both fossil evidence and genetics working together. The scientific world, once genuinely divided by pure speculation, finally had solid proof. Dragon Man was, in fact, Denisovan. The proteins that sealed the case. Confirmation didn't come only from ancient DNA analysis. It also came directly from the very proteins still preserved inside the Harbin skull. Qiaomei Fu's team extracted additional samples from the dense petrous bone and subjected them to a relatively new technique called paleoproteomic analysis. The results were genuinely staggering. The team identified more than 308,000 peptide spectrum matches, ultimately yielding a record-breaking 95 distinct proteins recovered from a single ancient human specimen. Among all of these proteins, 122 single amino acid variations stood out as being genuinely unique to this particular hominin. 3 of those specific variants matched exclusively with known Denisovan fossils, a molecular signature that left essentially no room left for doubt. Publication of these combined findings in June 2025 sent real ripples through the wider scientific community. 2 of the most prestigious journals in the field, Cell and Science, published the 2 related studies back to back, underscoring just how significant this evidence really was. Frida Welker, a leading authority on ancient protein analysis at the University of Copenhagen, reviewed the full data and described it as quite convincing. For the very first time, multiple independent lines of molecular evidence had converged on exactly the same conclusion. Dragon Man was Denisovan, not just according to genetic code, but according to the actual proteins that had once powered his living cells. What the Denisovans actually looked like. With the molecular case now firmly closed, scientific attention finally turned toward anatomy itself. The Harbin skull, now formally confirmed as Denisovan, offered the very first genuine glimpse of their actual face. The cranium stretched more than 9 inches in length and over 6 inches in width, confirming it as the largest human skull ever discovered. The brain case was long and low, rather than rounded like our own modern skulls, and the brow ridges projected real power above a pair of large, square eye sockets. The cheekbones, somewhat unexpectedly, were flat and quite delicate, giving the overall face a striking mixture of ancient raw power combined with a surprisingly modern subtlety. A broad nose and a wide, deep mouth completed the overall portrait, features that echoed directly the enormous molars that had puzzled Svante Pääbo years earlier. Paleoanthropologist Bensi Viola used these skeletal proportions to estimate the likely body that once carried such a head. The resulting numbers pointed toward a lean body mass of nearly 220 pounds, a figure more in line with a heavyweight athlete than with an ordinary modern human. This clearly represented a robust, physically imposing population, well built for survival across the genuinely harsh climates of Ice Age Asia. The long-hidden face of the Denisovans, concealed for well over 100,000 years, finally stood revealed through a combination of bone and protein evidence. Remarkably, these physical features closely matched predictions made years earlier through DNA methylation mapping, confirming just how powerful the technique of reading ancient anatomy directly from gene expression patterns could really be. Where earlier attempts at reconstruction had relied purely on educated guesswork and scattered fragments, the Harbin skull finally provided a complete, living link connecting the genetic code of the deep past directly to the actual faces of our long-vanished relatives. For the scientists who had chased this exact mystery for 15 years, this moment represented far more than simple vindication. It felt like an actual reunion with a long-lost branch of the human family, a population that spanned an entire continent. Denisovans were never limited to just a single cave hidden in Siberia. Their genetic signature, traced carefully through mitochondrial DNA, directly links the Harbin skull to an ancient lineage that once spanned thousands of miles across the Asian continent. Current analysis places this broader lineage somewhere between roughly 217,000 and 106,000 years ago, directly connecting Dragon Man from northeastern China back to the very first Denisovan individuals identified in the Altai Mountains. This kind of vast geographic range is genuinely unlike anything else seen among other archaic human populations from that same era. The reach of the Denisovans extends well beyond Harbin alone. Fossil sites scattered across China, including Dali in the Central Plains, Jinshan in the northeast, and Hualongdong further south, have all yielded skulls and bones, sharing features that closely echo those seen in the Harbin cranium. These remains all share a similar mixture of ancient and modern traits: broad faces, unusually large teeth, and generally robust builds. While direct genetic confirmation is still pending for several of these particular fossils, their striking anatomical similarities strongly suggest they may represent a much wider Denisovan population that once thrived across large parts of East Asia. The accumulating evidence points toward a resilient people who successfully adapted to an enormous range of different environments, from the frigid steppes of Siberia all the way to the humid forests and high plateaus found across China. The confirmed genetic connection between the Harbin skull and the original Siberian Denisovans fundamentally reshapes our understanding of ancient human migration patterns. Denisovans clearly weren't some isolated relic population confined to one small cave. They were a genuinely widespread population, leaving behind physical traces scattered from the Altai Mountains all the way to the banks of the Songhua River. The ongoing search for additional Denisovan fossils continues today, with every new discovery adding one more piece to the larger puzzle of exactly who these ancient humans really were, and just how far their legacy actually extended. The Denisovan legacy, living inside us. Today, Denisovan DNA never truly vanished along with their bones. Traces of this ancient lineage still quietly shape the biology of people living right now, today. In Papua New Guinea, nearly 5% of the average person's entire genome can be traced directly back to Denisovan ancestors. Aboriginal Australians and Filipino Negrito populations also carry significant amounts of Denisovan heritage, a lasting reminder of ancient journeys and encounters that helped shape the modern world we live in. One of the most remarkable examples of this legacy shows up high on the Tibetan Plateau. Up there, the thin mountain air holds only about 60% of the oxygen found down at sea level, and yet Tibetan populations thrive in that environment, largely thanks to a unique version of a gene called EPAS1. This particular genetic adaptation allows their bodies to use available oxygen far more efficiently, effectively preventing the dangerous effects normally associated with severe altitude sickness. Rasmus Nielsen, a geneticist at the University of California, Berkeley, traced this specific gene variant back to its true origins. He discovered that the Tibetan version of EPAS1 is almost genetically identical to the Denisovan version of the same gene, and it's found in essentially no other human population on Earth. It amounts to a genuine living gift passed down from a long-vanished people, an evolutionary advantage quietly written directly into ancient genetic code. The search continues. The techniques that ultimately revealed this remarkable connection are already reshaping how scientists search for our own deep past. Dental calculus, once dismissed as nothing more than fossilized plaque buildup, has become a genuinely vital scientific tool. It can preserve ancient DNA even when both bone and tooth enamel completely fail to do so, offering researchers an entirely new way to study fossils that were previously considered permanently silent. Chao Mei-Fu's team proved conclusively that even a sample the size of a pinhead can yield genuine secrets that had remained lost for well over 100,000 years. As excavations continue steadily across Asia, and as molecular research methods keep advancing rapidly, the full story of the Denisovans is clearly far from finished. Their genes, along with the innovative methods used to finally track them down, promise even more discoveries ahead, ones that will continue linking our distant past directly to our living present. For the very first time in 15 years, the Denisovan face is no longer just a ghost hiding somewhere inside our genome. It's genuinely real now, and its legacy quietly lives on inside billions of people today. As genetic science continues unlocking ancient secrets from something as small as a single speck of dental calculus, the line separating our past from our present keeps growing thinner and thinner. Our shared human story is still being written, one small fragment at a time. What would you ask our ancient cousins if given the chance?